alaikum, everyone. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I'm really excited to welcome you all to this ISB and ISB campus masterclass, all about thinking about giving. I'm sure a lot of us have plenty of questions about Zakat, so hopefully this masterclass will answer any of those questions. So I'd now love to introduce our speaker for today, Lucy Richelle Matthews. Lucy is currently the Director of Operations at the UK's National Zakat Foundation. She was previously at Save the Children, Plan International, Islamic Relief and MAID. Lucy is a chartered management accountant and is also the author of Welcome to Islam, A Convert's Tale. So I'd now like to introduce Lucy to take over.
Thank you so much, Mesa. Let me share my screen. There you go. Can you see that?
Yep, we can see that, yeah.
Great. So thinking about giving, why are we talking about this? British Muslims give a lot, but what problem are we trying to solve? Where is all our giving going? I want to start with a quick look at some other very generous givers. Bill and Melinda Gates. In 2019, they gave nearly £500,000, 423 million to be exact. £500 million, 423 million. They know what problem they want to solve. Each year, billions are spent on research worldwide, but only 10% of this money is used for research on diseases that affect 90% of the world population. There is a 10-90 gap in biomedical research, and they know what they want to achieve. Bill and Melinda Gates want to encourage researchers in the biomedical field to apply their knowledge and expertise to diseases and conditions that disproportionately affect the developing world. And so, they know the problem, they know what they want to achieve, they coordinate funds to make sure that they solve the problem and distribute their funds accordingly. We British Muslims give 550 million at least in a year. That's about 5% of UK Muslim spending power. Collectively, it can make a real difference. We currently give 98% of our zakat abroad to many different countries, many different causes. But what problem are we trying to solve? So what, as Muslims, is our biggest problem? Has God given us any guidance on what the biggest problem is? What collectively do we want to achieve? Anyone listening, do you have any thoughts on this? What is our biggest problem? What are we trying to achieve? If you do have any thoughts, could you pop them in the chat function? What do you think our biggest problem is?
No comments have come through.
No comments. Okay, it's fine. So, it says in the Quran, chapter 51, verse 56 to 58, "And I did not create the jinn and humankind except to worship me." I suggest that our biggest and most neglected problems are twofold: losing faith in an increasingly secular world and having significant individual and community needs in an increasingly global world where we can be so easily disconnected from each other. We don't even know how our neighbour is doing. And so the solution is twofold: strengthening faith bonds and building up our community. Because when community members can rely on each other and are working together with common goals, individuals become healthier and stronger and more able to give their best. When many are working together to give their best and take care of each other, what comes out of the community is more stable, more productive. And we have a God-given mechanism for that. We have Zakat. It's been given to many communities before us. So we're going to think about giving today, and we're going to talk about two areas. Firstly, what is Zakat and why we have it? And secondly, how do we decide where to give? So firstly, what is Zakat and why do we have it? There is just one verse which details the 8 categories of Zakat. Many are familiar with the first two, the poor and the needy. But God has given us 8. It's worth pointing out this third category, administrators, the people who manage your and my Zakat. We see many people wanting 100% of their zakat to go directly to those in need, which is fine, it's acceptable. But we also have to recognize this is a God-given category of zakat. We need people to organize it all. And if wages are kept so low that they only attract those with nominal qualifications and low efficiency, then overall costs will tend to be higher in the long run. The goal is to make sure that as much wealth as possible goes to the other categories. What are the other categories? Those whose hearts are to be reconciled, to free those in bondage, to the debt-ridden, and for the cause of God. This category, for the cause of God, is about protecting and defending faith. It may be interesting to note that the Queen has the title of Defender of the Faith. You may know that Prince Charles has voiced his preference for the more comprehensive title, Defender of Faith, instead. Anyway, jurists are in discussion about what is included within that for the cause of God, defending faith category, and many include those in scholastic training within the category. Scholarship is continuous engagement with the community's intellectual growth and prompting others for the sake of progressing Islam and the believers. And there's the eighth one for the wayfarer. So there are different interpretations of these eight. For example, the Hanafi school see these as categories as a safety net, targeting a very specific group of people who need urgent short-term help and need preventing them from falling through the safety net. The Maliki jurists are generally of the view that zakat is an economic empowerment resource for more long-term poverty alleviation. Imam al-Tabari summarizes all the eight categories into two essential functions. Firstly, fulfilling the needs of the Muslims, and secondly, assisting and strengthening Islam. From all of this, we can start to develop a vision of society funded by zakat. The vision here is a society where people are committed to getting closer to God. You can see there's two groups of people. There will always be wealth differences between individuals. There will always be some people who have more on the left and some who have less on the right. The vision is a society where the community is close and looks after each other's needs. You may notice that the circle of people who have more on the left look very much like those people who have less. It's not a coincidence. They are not an entirely different group, looking visibly different, wearing different clothes. They may live down your street, looking very much like you. And people may move between the circles, having times of being a giver and times of being a recipient of someone else's giving. But let's go back to the problem. There are a number of problems. While God is closer to us all than our jugular vein, many people don't feel connected to God. They don't feel connected at all, or they may feel connected only weakly. And secondly, while a large group of our community on the left may be thriving, see those two flowers, there is another group who are not. The clue there is the wilted flower. It says in the Quran, chapter 17, verse 21, "Your Lord gives plentiful sustenance or inadequate small amounts to who he pleases. He sees and is fully aware of his servants' needs." So there is a group who don't have enough on the right and may often be borrowing to finance their needs, getting an increasing debt. And the ties that bind and can strengthen are in fact weak. Those who have much may be giving some away, but it may not be reaching those in our community who need it. This inequality is extreme in many countries. The richest 1% of West Africans own more than everyone else combined in the region. In the UK, it is less unequal, but it is still unequal. The richest top 20% own 40% of wealth, and there's more inequality right at the top. The richest 1% own 13%. So what can we do? The first step is the Shahada. The Shahada bringing us all, whoever we are, closer to God. The second step is our Salat, the prayer. Salat done as it is meant to be, not only brings each one of us closer to God, but also brings us closer as a community. You see Salah, you see the Shahada, but the third step is Zakat. Zakat means purification, blessing, and growth. Where Zakat is used to help those who have less to thrive, then slowly, that flower that was wilted has sufficient and continuous support to start to grow. There's maybe a lot happening on that little image there. It's simple in some ways. God, those who have more, those who have less, a constant watering of the flower, thriving of the community, enabling everyone to flourish. And so we reach the end point. When we feel closer to God and the community is close, looking after each other's needs, and it is sustainable. Zakat is continuous, or rather continual, and both groups are thriving. Let's now turn to the benefits of Zakat. Why do you think we have Zakat? Are there any comments on what you see as the benefits of Zakat? If you have any thoughts as to the benefits, please pop them now into the chat. Are there any thoughts from Asa, or shall I carry on?
No, nothing's come through yet.
Very quiet today. Okay, so I've categorized the benefits into 4. The first one is connection with God. Let's take each one in turn. If you look at connection with God, hopefully you can see how Zakat brings both the giver, the recipient, and therefore the community closer to God. All 3 different areas will be feeling closer to God. But that's a key part of Zakat. Just like the Shahada and the Salat are all there to get us closer to God. But what about connection with people? Well, the giver feels compassion and belonging. The recipient feels cared for and also belonging. And again, the community feels closer. There are some mindset benefits too. The giver feels gratitude. The recipient will be thankful, but also likely to be less jealous of those who have more. And overall, the community is supportive. And finally, there are financial benefits. For givers, their wealth is full of barakah. For recipients, they can access their needs. Wealth is circulating, and inequality, while still inevitable, is reduced. We've taken a whistle-stop tour of Zakat. We've looked at what is the vision, what is it all about, why do we give it, and what are the benefits of it.
Sorry, Auntie Lucy, we did have a couple of comments come through.
Okay, great. Would you like to share them?
Yeah, so one person said that helped to alleviate poverty.
Yes.
And we've also had someone ask, when we are paying Zakat out of our income in the UK, do we still have to pay our Zakat?
Ah, okay. So yeah, if we go back to the benefits about that was alleviating poverty, absolutely, reducing inequality, and part of it is alleviating poverty. But a key aspect is about reducing the gap between the givers and receivers. And in fact, when recently a survey was done in the UK about people's biggest concern, wealth inequality was a key one that British people very recently highlighted. In terms of giving, do we still have to give zakat on our income? I presume that is a question because we pay income tax. That was why the question was asked. Zakat is a tax on our wealth, which is very different in terms of compared to a tax on income. The second thing is, if you look at the purpose of zakat, who it's for, and who gives it and who receives it, it is very different from what is happening to our income tax and who is coordinating that. So there is a very different function of it that fulfills very different purposes. So while I am here in my capacity as somebody who spends a lot of time on Zakat, my understanding from the Zakat scholars is that still it's very much an obligation on those of us in the UK. Thank you, Ramesa. So now let's turn to the second aspect. How do we decide where to give? Just a word of warning, there is a bit of a poll here, or a quiz. So for those of you who haven't yet given any comments, I would like you to take part in this very quick quiz. We've looked at a little bit of the theory of Zakat. Now let's turn to what do we do in practice? How actually do we decide where to give? It may be our Zakat, it may be our Sadaqah. So we'll look at these in 5 areas. The first one is, let's look at, is it Zakat or Sadaqah? Some people think of it as almost interchangeable. We know they're different, but we still seem to give them in the same way. So let's look first at the difference. And then we'll look at where to give. Should we give at home, or could we give anywhere in the world? Thirdly, what do we give for? Specific causes. And then fourthly, who do we give for? Do we give to an individual, or do we give to a charity or through a charity? And finally, if we are giving our Zakat or Sadaqah through a charity, how on earth do we choose which one? Let's start with the first. And you'll see at the top right of all the slides, you'll see these 5 things, so you'll know where we are in case you want to understand where we are with the 5. So the first one, is it Zakat or Sadaqah? So there are a number of different aspects of charitable giving, and God has given us a large amount of guidance with our Zakat. So if we look at the different elements, there are 9 here. And I'd like to ask you to, in a moment, Adam, who's supporting us on this call, will put a poll in, which is it compulsory to give? These questions are only on Zakat. Is it compulsory to give Zakat if you have a certain amount of wealth? Is it given at a certain time of year? Is it given on a specific due date? Is it given on specific assets? Meaning, do we have to give, for example, Zakat on our house? Or do we only look at certain parts of our assets? Do we give a specific amount, or can we give however much we choose? Number 6, do we give it to specific types of causes, or has God chosen what these causes are? Do we have to give it to one cause only, or can we spread our giving? Must we give it within a certain area or a certain country? Or can we give it anywhere we want? And must it be collected and distributed centrally? So have a go at the poll and submit your answer. It's all anonymous, so it doesn't matter. We won't see what you put.
Sorry, can I just ask everyone, if you have any questions, can you please put them in the Q&A box as opposed to the chat box? Because I think if you're getting missed. So yeah, if you could put any questions in the Q&A box, that'd be great. Thank you.
So there's just 9 questions there. And if you could just mark each one with a tick, meaning yes, or obviously a cross, meaning no. Adam, is it time to show any results? Okay, so 100% of people say it's compulsory to give. Absolutely. Is it given at a certain time of year? So that's very interesting. Half the people say yes, it is given at a certain time of year, and half people say no, it isn't. Actually, it's I can tell you that National Zakat Foundation gets approximately between sort of 75 and 80% of Zakat during Ramadan. But that isn't when Zakat must be given. In Ramadan, people understand the gates of heaven are opened, but it's not the time that Zakat must be given. It can be given, but it doesn't have to be given at that time of year. And I presume those people who say, yes, maybe thinking of it, that it must be given in Ramadan. However, the question 3 is slightly different. Must be given on a specified due date. We all have a Zakat anniversary. So the answer to 2 is actually no, it doesn't have to be given at a certain time of year, as in it not always in Ramadan or in Shawwal or whatever. But the answer to question 3 is yes, it must be given on a specified due date, but your specified due date isn't necessarily the same as mine. It's whatever is your Zakat anniversary from a year on, a lunar year on, from when you gave it last. Is it given on specific assets? Absolutely, 100% all right. Is it a specific amount? Perhaps there's obviously the wording could be clearer, but yes, it is a specific amount. We are given very quite precise guidance as to what proportion of our wealth is to be paid on our different assets. And you'll find various Zakat calculators on charity websites to help you calculate your Zakat. Is it given to specific type of causes? Yes, it is. We have those 8 categories of Zakat. And so if we want to give Zakat, it's really worth us knowing which of those categories it applies to. Is it given to a single cause? 100% say no, which is absolutely right. There are 8 categories of Zakat. If you want to give your Zakat to a single cause, you absolutely can. We do not have to give to all 8 categories. We don't have to give to 4, we don't have to give to 2. We can choose to give all of it to a single cause, but there are 8 there, and we can give to any one or more of them. And this is interesting. Is it given within a certain area or country? 95% of people say no. In other words, from what I understand of that answer, 95% of people say it can be given anywhere. We'll come on to that as when we look at whether Zakat is meant to be given at home or abroad. But the understanding of the majority of scholars, I think, is that it is firstly given locally and then abroad. So we'll come on to that in a little bit more detail. And then there's a bit of a division there. 42% say it's collected and distributed centrally. 58% say no, it isn't. In terms of our behavior as individual givers, we do tend to give it wherever we like. But if we look at the prophetic way and how it was done after his time, it was coordinated centrally. Because we know if you really want to make an impact, it makes sense to be systematic about it. I could give over there, someone else over there, someone to a little project over there, and we'll all be giving tiny little bits in different places. But if you think back to how I started with Bill and Melinda Gates, they knew what problem they were trying to solve, and then they funneled their resources to try and solve that problem. And we can only really do that if we coordinate the amazing amount of funds that Muslims so generously give.
We've had someone ask, sorry, when do we start giving zakat?
So the zakat is due when your wealth becomes over the nisab, level of nisab, and you're able to look up the nisab online very easily. It's also generally on charity websites. You can, a parent can pay on a child's behalf, but it becomes obligatory on anyone once they have wealth over their nisab. So this is how a sort of a sort of non-nuanced answer to zakat and the different dimensions of zakat. If we now look at how sadaqah is different, you can see that there aren't any of these same guidelines with sadaqah, apart from possibly the argument about there's an argument for sort of coordinating our sadaqah if we're trying to achieve a certain objective. So zakat is an obligation with a defined amount, defined time periods, recipients, and with the same purpose as the other pillars: strengthen the individual and community spiritually, and in the case of zakat, materially too. So we really need to think about how our choice of individuals and charities enable us to fulfill that real purpose of zakat. And then with sadaqah, it's given anywhere, anytime, any method. It's not even necessarily financial. When it comes to sadaqah, there aren't restrictions. It's worth noting, though, that should we want to give it, that we should still want to give our zakat and our sadaqah effectively to make the most difference with the amount we give. As a side note, Zakat in the Quran is often referred to as sadaqah, as it is a specific and obligatory type of sadaqah. But I hope that little side point doesn't cause too much confusion right now. So let's look at where to give. Should we give home or do we give anywhere? You might notice in the bottom right-hand corner that small question, where is home? Do you have any thoughts on where is home in the chat? Is home here, where we live? Is home somewhere where we are trying to build up our future? Or is home somewhere where we came from, where we have relatives?
So we've had someone say where we are from.
Okay, home is where we are from.
Someone else has said, can zakat be only given to Muslims and sadaqah to anyone?
Okay, we'll come to who do we give it to later. But if we're just focusing right now on the location of zakat, in the poll, I saw 95% of people said zakat can be given anywhere, and yet it's very interesting because 98% of UK zakat goes abroad, right? So if the 95% of people are right and we can give it anywhere, that almost feels a bit disproportionate. 98% goes abroad. Sheikh Yasir Qadi recently, I don't know if any of you heard his recent Q&A, he advised that actually for his listeners to give a third abroad, a third to family, and a third locally. But our giving patterns at the moment for zakat are very different. So I mean, home is not defined or local isn't defined, but I've thought of 3 considerations that can help us look at where it is. Do I have a responsibility to individuals there? Because beyond the scope of international relations and emergency situations, jurists agree that believers in a specific region hold a core responsibility to one another, and the needy of the land in which zakat is collected have more rights over those in another land. I suppose if you think of it like family, our immediate family have more rights over us than someone than our neighbours, and our neighbours have more rights over us than someone in a completely different part of the country. So the idea of rights and responsibility is very important. It seems to be the position of all jurists that not all Muslims across the globe equally qualify for zakat collected from a specific region. For example, the Malikis considered it obligatory to distribute to the same region. The Hanafis stated it was obligatory except for relatives in need, or where the needs of others are greater, or where it is of greater benefit to Muslims generally. And yet, as I mentioned, Sheikh Yasir Qadi advised to distribute it a third, a third, a third. So that's why I've, based on, while it's not exactly clear-cut, it seems to be that the majority position is for zakat primarily to be home, and then as a first responsibility, and then we have a responsibility, but a lesser responsibility abroad. Second consideration is belonging. Do I feel I belong? It may be what one of the viewers said, that where we came from, maybe we feel we belong there. Maybe we feel we belong somewhere I'm trying to build as a future for my children who may be existent or non-existent at this stage. And the third consideration is, are there people eligible to receive zakat there? Of course, if we're giving zakat, we need to be able to find people or causes eligible for zakat. So again, that would be home first and then global. And some people say we should give to where is the greatest need. But what is that greatest need? What is the greatest problem? So let's turn to that issue. What should we give for? So the first thing is, if it is zakat, we really obviously must first think about which of the 8 categories we're giving it to. What about a cause we care about? Maybe a relative died of cancer. Maybe we're greatly moved by international suffering shown by the media. But we do need to be careful. Sometimes we may personally care about something, but is it really the most effective use of our giving? What about spreading our giving? Many people take this approach, and we have mentioned how we've been advised to spread our giving across different places. I can see the benefits of it. I can also see that if we find something we find is effective, then investing more in the single place also makes a lot of sense. Now, what about spreading your giving over the last 10 nights of Ramadan? I know there are some apps which allow you to spread your donation. Now, it might make the giver feel like you're getting more blessings, but it's worth at least being aware that charities typically have to pay quite a lot to the app makers for this facility of enabling donors to spread their donation over the last 10 nights of Ramadan. And so the more that donors collectively give this way, the less that actually reaches the charity so that they can help those in need. But of course, we are all able to choose however we'd like to give our giving. And so if you would like to spread your giving over the last 10 nights, you as an individual giver are entirely able to make that choice. There's another consideration as well. What is the biggest problem? To me, this one is key. Let's think about what is the biggest problem and then give to the organization or organizations who are trying to solve it. Earlier, I alluded to the problem of lack of faith, declining faith in us as individuals or in our community. Maybe in a generation or two, we won't have people who will even know what Zakat is, and let alone have Zakat to give. And another problem is the inequality between our communities, trying to make sure that our community is supported with its needs. So linked to this problem is another one, the most neglected. It's not for nothing that the title of neglected tropical diseases was coined. When something is a big problem and most neglected, these should be key motivators to encourage us to give. What about long-term change? This is certainly more strategic. Yet many of us love to see food parcels, for example, being delivered to people. We really need to think about this one. Is it about short-term results? Or do we want to see a significant change in our community's condition, a change which will only come about with time and investment? Amazon hasn't stopped growing over 20 years. Every year they could sit back and take the profits, but they were relentless about growth. And then now, when they do actually start taking profit, it's in the billions annually. Similar to Amazon, the British Muslim community needs to have a vision and then needs to execute on it. As the Islamic Finance Group said, we need to forgo, perhaps, a few short-term wells in Africa this year, so we might deal with the water shortage problem once and for all in a decade. And then there's making a difference. We all want to make a difference, but it links to the long-term change point. We can make a difference through both short-term and long-term help. What about making the most difference? This is a really hard one. If the entire UK Muslim population put in donations of $1 billion into this, we'd make up only 0.37% of the required amount to lift and alleviate world hunger. If we look at giving to the biggest problem and the most neglected problem, this is a good way to start thinking about how to make the most difference. And finally, has someone asked us for help? We're human. If someone asks, we often want to give, and maybe we should, but it is just worth stopping to think, is this the biggest problem? Is it neglected? Is this the best use of my money? So then we come on to who to. Who should we give to an individual or to charity? And I'll try to mention the thing about bringing a Muslim or not. So there are a number of considerations here. Do you know them? Are you responsible for them? And thirdly, are they eligible for Zakat? Can you do any checks to make sure they are? If you're sure about those three things, you know them, you're responsible for them, and they're eligible for Zakat, giving to an individual is a great idea. But thinking about whether we should give Zakat to Muslims or to everybody else, if you think about the whole purpose of Zakat and what I mentioned about Imam Tabari, about strengthening Islam and supporting Muslims and the need of Muslims, it's almost like a membership fee of something that Muslims can give. Now, of course, anyone can choose to be part of that membership, but given that it is the members who are paying, it would be quite legitimate to expect it to be the members who are receiving, because we can go from being givers to recipients. Any one of us as members in this group could be a giver one year and a recipient another. So I would encourage us with our zakat to give within our Muslim community, but to give sadaqah to wherever you feel is the best use of your sadaqah. There are some other practical things you may want to think about. Maybe they don't need all of your zakat, so you might still need to find other avenues. Do they actually want your help? I know a number of people who don't want to accept zakat, even though they are eligible. And can you actually help them? Can you practically get them the help they need, when and how they need it? UK homelessness charities are almost unanimous on the question of giving money directly. They say it's better not to. Some charities acknowledge it's of course intended to be kind, but others are saying simply don't give to individuals. Either way, it's very hard for an individual giver to make all the checks that are needed. So finally, let's say you've decided to give to a charity. This is the fifth step. How do you decide which one? The more disconnected we are from each other, the less we can rely on each other to be good and, importantly, effective. So we need to find out what we can about which are the good charities. Where should we give? And it depends on whether you have time to research or not. So if you have time to research, then read annual reports, go through the websites, see what others have said about it, positive and negative, and then take a look at the following aspects. Is it making a difference? Is it an expert in what it does? Is it established? Has it been going for a long time? Is it well run? What do you think of the people who are running it? Have you looked to see who's on their board, who's on their main senior management? What do you think of the people who are speaking out, promoting the charity? Is it transparent? Is it telling you either on the website or in its annual report, or to you as an individual giver, how it is using your funds? You have trusted this charity with your zakat or your sadaqah. You are entitled to understand how is it using your individual donation and donations in general. But maybe,
Angelisa, sorry, we've had a couple of questions come in. Would you like me to read them out for you?
Can you just, I'll just be finished in just a few minutes, and then I could take questions all together, if that's okay.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Thanks. So if you don't have time to research, and a lot of us don't have time, I understand this is not your area, I strongly suggest there are two things you don't think about too much. Giving because the advert moved me. Now that's what it is meant to do. And I'm sorry for all my marketing colleagues, but we must try to almost go beyond the emotions. Is it the best use of our giving? And a second aspect that I would suggest not to think about too much is, does the charity have zero admin costs? Because if it does, who is going to make sure your giving gets to its intended recipient? How will that happen in a quality way with quality people and efficient use of technology? Should the people work for free? And if you want them to work for low pay, because you say it needs to be funded out of gift aid with all the other things that must be funded out of gift aid, what kind of people do you think will typically work for such low pay? It may be people who are prepared to make great personal sacrifice. It may be people who have made their money, or people who can't see a way to make more money elsewhere. Either way, you'll end up with a very small pool of potential people. When you buy a product like an iPad, you don't check on the pay of the workers or the CEO. You want to make sure it's a quality product, or you want to make sure the service you're buying is a quality service. And it should be the same for the money that you entrust the charity. You're entitled to a quality service. It should be less about the admin costs. So here are some things that you can find out more quickly. Do people you trust in this area endorse it? And secondly, do experts endorse it? There are several kinds of experts, and ideally they would all endorse it. One is Sharia experts. Is the zakat distributed in a Sharia compliant way? You'll see this on their website, or you should do. One is the financial auditor. Is it a big and reputable company who are auditing, who have gone through all those financials with a tooth comb? And one is a charity evaluator. In the UK, we have an evaluator called Charity Clarity. You can go online in your own time and have a look at it. Charity Clarity. You can search for the charity that you want, that you're thinking of giving to, and it may be there. It measures the financial health of a charity. It measures the accountability and transparency, and it measures how accessible that information is being made to you. And the final one is, do you have a personal connection? Because if you do, you're far more likely to know whether that charity is well run or not. So we've gone through what is Zakat and why we have it. We've looked at how to decide where to give. Let's plant the seeds in this world so we can harvest them in the hereafter. Let's invest our energy, our focus, and our time on what would make the most impact in this world and be of most benefit to us and to all those in our community in the hereafter. And now, over to you, to questions. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair. That was really, really interesting. We've had a couple of questions come throughout the talk, so I'll just read a couple of those out to you. If anyone does have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box as opposed to the chat box, and I will read them out from here. So we've had Arif ask, can we give zakat to relatives, for example, a sister who I have to look after and her children's living expenses and accommodation back home?
Yes, if you recall from the presentation, part of our, one of the group people who I said to give to as individuals are people who you have a responsibility for. And so firstly, when I'm answering these, I'm not a Zakat scholar, and so there are places you can go for that. But certainly relatives are a place that you can give your Zakat to.
Okay, great. And we've had Osama ask, sometimes our biggest problem can be overwhelmed by the deaths of the poor individuals abroad. Perhaps it's that guilt that makes us unable to give to projects that we are passionate about. How can we overcome this?
Yeah, so that's interesting. It comes to understanding what is the greatest problem. It is terrible to see suffering. There is suffering everywhere, but it also said in the Quran, I don't know if you remember from the verse I quoted at the beginning, that God has given some more than others, and we can't make us all equal. We can't stop world suffering everywhere. And I also quoted the stat saying if we all gave to world hunger, all the Muslims, we would only alleviate 0.37% of it. And so I also mentioned about giving to the most neglected problems. And so we can all give to those who are facing massive problems abroad. And I don't underestimate the nature of their problems and the difficulties that they're facing. But at the same time, if you think about what's happening here in the UK, the state of our community, and I'm sure I don't need to mention the number of problems that we have in this community in so many areas, it's not time for despair, it's time for opportunity, because there is potentially so much that we can do to channel into some of these projects, perhaps that you're feeling like they really matter. We're talking about long-term change here, strategic change of the position of our community, and making a difference. So in terms of changing your emotion, I can't do that, but all I could ask you to do is almost to step away a bit and not be so moved by any individual sort of advert here and there, but to take a step back and think, just like the Gates family did, what actually is the problem that I'm trying to solve? What is the greatest need, and what is most neglected? Are there lots of other people out there trying to solve that other problem? And perhaps there aren't that many of us trying to solve this particular problem. And so maybe you're in a really good position to try to solve this particular problem that you care about.
Okay, great. Jazakallah. We've also had Shakil ask, do you agree that the biggest problem the world has is the unfair distribution of resources?
So if you think about what we're all going to be held to account for on the Day of Judgment, the first thing is not going to be, was there inequality in your world? There are two areas, right, that we talk about. The first is going to be our commitment to God, And the second is, did we look after all of those people who we have a responsibility for? We can't, well, obviously we ask several questions and so on the day of judgment, but there are certain responsibilities that we have that we are meant to fulfill during our life. We can't have a responsibility to everyone in the world. We can try to help who we can with whatever resources we can, but it's as we move outward, it's less and less of our responsibility. So all those of us with a family know that our primary responsibility is to our family. And then we'll be aware of the hadith that talks about our responsibility to our neighbours 40 houses to the right and 40 houses to the left of us, and so on and so on. Our responsibility goes outwards, and we need to try to take care of all of the needs of those who are closest to us first before going outwards. So, so that's how I would answer the biggest problem.
Okay. We also have Adam who's asking, do I have to give zakat on stocks, and how much do I have to pay?
So my understanding of stock is that zakat is due on stock. There is a different calculation though, and so the latest calculation that I saw in terms of understanding the percentages is that because it's to do with looking at how much productive assets that are within the particular stock you own, on average it ends up that the zakat is approximately 1% on stocks and shares. If you'd like to use this as a zakat calculator, and while I'm talking here in a personal capacity, I know that the National Zakat Foundation does have a zakat calculator, as do other charities as well. So if you go on there then and you put in the calculator your particular stocks and shares and so on, then the calculator will take that into account.
Okay, great. We've also had Shaquille ask, is the creation of class a divine creation? This is what it seems to me that you are saying. The risk can include guidance as well as financial resources.
What was the last bit? The risk can include?
The risk can include guidance as well as financial resources.
That's right, guidance and financial resources. So am I saying it is divine that there's inequality? It says, chapter 17, verse 21, your Lord gives plentiful sustenance or in adequate small amounts to who he pleases. So I'm not saying that. I'm quoting from the Quran that there are people with more, and yes, sustenance can be guidance and provisions, but there are always going to be people with more and people with less, even if we start on a level playing field, just by virtue of being born in one country versus in another, being born in one family versus another. There is inevitably going to be inequality, but then we have a responsibility to do what we can to make sure that the community that we're responsible for is I suppose a stronger community and has its needs met as much as possible. It's going to be very hard to make any group of people literally 100% equal.
Great. We also have Osama asking, what charities do you personally see that you believe are really solving massive problems in our society, bar NZF?
So that's a you put me on the spot there in terms of what do I personally see. I mean, the biggest problem I see is actually what I outlined, right? And you said bar NZF, but there is a reason why I work there. There is a reason why I said I'm not here trying to promote it, but there is a reason why I spend so many hours of my days, because I think it's really important what it does. There are other charities that are very transparent. For example, Against Malaria Foundation is one that I've seen that is so efficient, has very few people working there, but has really has invested in technology to get malaria bed nets to certain places in Africa, and then tells the donor when it has distributed those bed nets, which is great, right? It's amazing in terms of what it's done in terms of reducing the transmission of malaria. That's something very specific. when I think about us as Muslims, could other people help with that problem? And are there more neglected problems that perhaps as Muslims only we will be more interested in funding? That's what I would turn back to you.
Okay, great. Jazakallah. Can I just remind everyone, if you do have any questions, pop them in the Q&A box just so I can read them out. We have Lizita. She's asking, is zakat due on our houses?
No, zakat is not due on our property. That is assuming that this is the property that you live in. If it is on, even on, if you happen to be in this category of people who have a second home and you are renting it out, then in terms of your, when you look at your wealth, then your rental income would be taken into consideration as part of your wealth. But property income isn't part of zakat, from what I understand, as long as it is held for the longer term.
Okay, and we have Sonia is asking, should we give our zakat every day?
You may give your zakat every day, or you may give it all at once. Because I mentioned that in the charity where I work, 80% is given in Ramadan. It's actually not problematic for us that happens, because it makes it easier for the charity to understand and to plan and to know then, because people need zakat throughout the year, we know how much zakat we have to be able to distribute to people in need. But at the same time, if you want to give your zakat throughout the year, you can absolutely do that. Try to spread it out to make it easier for you to manage, rather than have to give it out all at once. But the main thing is that the zakat is given on your, is that you look and you've made sure that you've given all of your zakat by the time of your zakat anniversary.
Okay, and we have Arif is asking, what about jewelry? Is zakat due on that?
There are different opinions on jewelry. In some jurists take the opinion that zakat is due on jewelry, and others don't. So you'll have to, I'm afraid, look at take the opinion that you feel most comfortable with.
Okay, so that's all the questions that have come through. If anyone else does have any others, please do drop them in now so I can read them out for you. Maybe give it a few seconds. None have come through so far. So,
well, thank you for all of the questions that you've asked, and I hope I have gone some way to answering them.
Oh no, Jazakallah. So we've had a couple of comments say how useful and insightful the talk was. So Jazakallah khair. It was really, really interesting. Honestly, I feel like a lot of my own questions have been answered through this talk. So Jazakallah khair for taking the time out to share all that information with us. Okay, take care everyone. Assalamu alaikum.